man's world. I have turned the soul of this.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Faking It podcast. I'm your host Miriam Haart and I'm here with my dear friend Diya. If you watched our YouTube video about how to get into colleges, you've heard me say dear friend Diya in Delhi because I was in Delhi when we did that together, which was super fun. Diya, do you want to introduce yourself really quickly and tell the listeners why I chose you to have this feminist conversation with all my friends?
So, hi guys, I'm Diya. I'm a sophomore at Stanford and I've known Miriam since 3 weeks into freshman year, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And
I don't know why I thought that was funny, but you just did. Okay, continue.
and as soon as we met, we just realized we're both really into talking about feminism and religion and just our relationships with our identities a lot. And I think that's always something we've really bonded over.
Mm-hmm.
And all our conversations, feminism gets brought into it somehow.
Yeah.
So I think it is just fitting that I'm on this podcast to talk about feminism today. I'm studying CS in English and I'm a writer. I'm writing for the LA Times this summer.
Yes, queen. Let's go.
And all of my writing focuses mainly on feminist topics and topics related to identity and empowerment.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's something that I feel really deeply about and write about and speak about.
No, it's really a big part of your identity, I would say. And, especially with your writing and everything that you do there, it's also very profound and you are a prolific writer and very incredible. So recommend everybody to check out your work if they can. I'll drop some links, But yeah, also one fun story I want to tell the Faking It fam about our friendship is how in the beginning you told me that I posted a story of you on my Instagram a year ago or 2 years ago now probably of you using the My Unorthodox filter that I made a long time ago, and I didn't realize that I did that. And then you pointed out, you're like, by the way, you reposted my story once. And I was like, oh. And it was just a funny thing how then we became friends after that too. But I just thought it was super funny. But yeah, let's talk about feminism. So want to just explain the basics. What is feminism? When did it start? And just the background there. And then we can go into the linguistics of it too.
Mm-hmm. So feminism, the definition of feminism is just equality of the sexes. Okay. And I think because it's feminism, there's this misconception in society that it means that we need to treat women better than men, which isn't true, but that's the reason why a lot of people think feminists are evil, bra burning, men hating people, which is just not true. And I would even say that if you are man hating, then you're not a feminist, because it literally means equality of the sexes, and it means realizing that even men are affected by the patriarchy, and just working on ways to empower everyone by existing in a less gendered society.
So if it's just about equality, then why isn't it called equalism? Why is it feminism? Why not menism?
It's called feminism because historically it's always been women who are subjugated. So when you're trying to make the sexes equal, what you're doing mostly is making sure that feminine qualities in men are celebrated and that women of all kinds are celebrated and all of that stuff so that women can enjoy equal status as men. Yeah. And humanism also exists and it means equality of all people. But since feminism is centered on gender specifically, but also obviously it's intersectional because race intersects with gender. But I think feminism is a great way to focus on what we're actually trying to do, is empower women and feminine qualities in the world.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting too, because this makes me think of the great Taylor, I forgot his James something Taylor. He was a philosophy professor at Stanford. He recently passed away actually. And he said that one of the issues with the Black Lives Matter movement is that people get so caught up in the linguistics of Black Lives Matter that they feel excluded. And he was saying that if it said Black Lives Matter too, it would change the way that people thought about the Black Lives Matter movement. And that reminds me of feminism because of the word feminist, like feminine in feminism makes people just latch on like, oh, it's only about women, or oh, Black Lives Matter is only about Black lives. And really, no, it's about equality of all lives, you know, and it's about like helping everyone, men, women, non-binary, any person kind of feel equal within their gender identity, you know? And so it is, I understand why people can get lost in that rhetoric and that confusion with the word feminism and think that women should be greater than men. But like you're saying, that's not the case at all. And it's really just about helping people because women were subjugated in the past, which is really interesting. So I want to go into a little bit of the history of feminism too. At least like, I know obviously the global history, like there's too much to say there, but in terms of what we should know right now and how we are where we are. And let's just say like the US, or I know you're from India. So I mean, like we don't have to go to, like, if you know a little about India, and I don't know if you want to share anything there. That's interesting. But do you want to just talk about like how we got to where we are a little bit in the sense?
So like there've been like 3 waves of the feminist movement, and you may argue that maybe you think society is equal now because women can vote and like women can wear pants and stuff like that. But those things, those more basic human rights, or we're still dealing with basic human rights, but stuff like voting and all that came in like first wave feminism. And like each wave dealt with different issues. But right now it's very focused on like abortion rights, or I think even like non-binary and trans identities is something that's very recently been very accepted into our society. And the rhetoric and like the focus of the feminist movement changes over time, and every single new win opens up doors for more wins in the future.
So when was the first wave of feminism? When was the second? And what would you consider? You said we're in the third wave, or what is that?
So the first wave of feminism was in the 18th and 19th centuries, and that was mainly concerned with women's suffrage. This wave was led mostly by like cisgender, white, middle-class women. And after we got like suffrage and women had a bit like higher position in society, the second wave of feminism came up, building on the first. But now like this was intersecting with like the Black Power movement and the realization that like people of all ethnicities are equal. And because of that, the second wave of feminism, which was like in the 60s to the 90s, they were a lot more intersectional. And the second wave of feminism was very like angry about all gender norms, and they would shun red lipstick and push-up bras, and they were just like trying to reject all signs of conventional womanhood.
Interesting.
And but then when the third wave arose in the mid-90s, which is what we're currently in, it's more tempered. It's more like accepting that you can have a push-up bra and a brain at the same time. It's at the same time a lot more accepting of all kinds of different identities. Because of the cyber age we're in, a big focus is also like cyber feminism, and just this belief that cyberspace is a really productive space to have discussions of gender bending, because the cyber world is a disembodied space. And you can create avatars and you can be whoever you want to be, and no one is looking at your body and judging you in any way.
The Glitch Feminist Manifesto or something like that. Wasn't it like
It was just glitch feminism, yeah.
Okay, but that was just talking about the idea that like on the internet and on these online spaces, a lot of like female people were able to just explore their gender identity and explore the way they express themselves through avatars, which is so interesting and so cool. And I guess it is a way that we are now like kind of breaking out of gender norms as well in digital spaces, which is a very big part of who we are, our digital presence and our digital, face in general. So it's really interesting. It's really cool. What would you say are some like benefits from this third wave of feminism and some like problems actually that exist in this third wave of feminism, if there are any.
I really, also because I exist in this age, and I think third wave feminism is what we're currently going through, I totally agree that you can be pretty and smart at the same time as the third wave feminist rhetoric goes. I think there needs to be a greater focus on how technology can be bad for women. I think there's already some of that, but I still think like it's so prevalent in society and it's so under-researched because it's so new. And I don't think like universities or organizations have the setup to be studying it as rigorously as they should be.
There was this one study that I was reading recently from like the Human Center for like Artificial Intelligence.
Yeah.
And it was about how the YouTube recommendation algorithm system was promoting like unhealthy eating videos for 17-year-old girls. And by showing them these videos, they themselves have a higher chance of developing eating disorders. And so just like that in itself was a very revolutionary study because like you said, there aren't that many done. Are there any other just areas that come to mind of things that in technology women have been affected by that are maybe under-researched?
Yeah, I mean, so last winter I actually did research at the Stanford Humanities Center on feminist technology.
That's so cool.
And honestly, like the research actually went so deep into it as to say like technology is intrinsically misogynistic. Like you would think it's not a living thing, so it must be neutral. But then all kinds of technology is made by humans. Obviously, all algorithms are biased because data sets that they learn from are formed by an inherently biased world. And I think that's really interesting. But even like workplaces, like tech is a male-dominated world, and that's not going to be fixed just by adding more women in the workplace,
right?
Because the very like structures that exist in the workplace are now catering to men and not adequately to women. Like there's not enough maternity leave. You really don't have a lot of like resources. If you're on your period, you get free pads. What about childcare? All of those things are as important as hiring a diverse workforce, which I think is the main focus right now. Whereas the focus should be more on, okay, like you're hiring us, but how are you actually treating us?
Right. That's right. There's so much I want to touch on there. I think what you said about machine bias and having like inherent biases in any like technology, there's so many examples of that, especially for women too, in the sense where there's like the airbags has been like systematically killing more women in cars than men because the test dummies have been taller and male bodies, you know, and they were not training for pregnant women in these car seats either. And so there's like deaths that are happening because of machine bias. Like Asian people wearing VR headsets, eye tracking hasn't been working for them. You know, there's like so many studies being done that there just isn't this way of checking for diversity and practicing that.
Yeah, but there's like so much, even like in terms of healthcare.
Yeah.
For example, like PCOD is one of the most common things, like illnesses in women. I just know so many of my friends who suffer from it, but it's so heavily under-researched that if you look up statistics online, some say, oh, like 3 in 10 women have it. Some say 7 in 10 women have it. Like it's just crazy.
What is
like
that?
it's polycystic ovarian
syndrome, PCOS.
PCOS.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then like no one really knows like what's a particular plan of action for like solving it.
Right.
Like you can't cure it yet.
Yeah. And I think that's a really interesting point. Like all of these seem somewhat like subtle issues that women face. And that's really what the third wave of feminism is about, is like attacking these just systematic issues that have existed because they started in the 1950s and the 1940s, and now they still exist today. And it's kind of about not breaking down these systems, but restructuring them so they're more inclusive, you know? And so I think I get asked this question a lot of the time of like, that women are treated equally. Like, why are you so proud to be a feminist? What is your response to that question?
I'm proud to be a feminist because especially like the world I grew up in New Delhi, like in my CS class, I was one of like 6 girls in a class of 70 students. And the professor was male. The professor made it clear that he saw his students as women versus men. And he would, I don't know, I've had like math teachers who told my parents like, oh, like, she's not that good at math, but that's okay. Like, I don't expect women to be anyway. You should just make her not study math if you can. Like, just stuff like that. I also grew up in one of the rape capitals of the world. And so I think because of that, whenever I was out, even just like taking a walk, I was very aware of the fact that I am a woman and I can get attacked at any moment. So I think just like a lot of factors in my upbringing made me very focused on the fact that I was a woman in negative ways. And so when I first started reading feminist philosophy and just like feminist think pieces, it was a completely new way of looking at the world that I don't think anyone had ever showed me existed before. Even like, that's why there's a whole like feminist studies major at Stanford, because even if like you study whatever politics or English, like you're not going to really learn about the woman's side of things. Like obviously universities are making more of an effort now, but just syllabi traditionally have been very male dominated.
Right.
And
you know that what I'm reading right now in my philosophy class, there has not been any female philosopher. Not one. I'm in philosophy 1. The teacher changed the syllabus last week to include one female philosopher. But like from the get-go, there were 0. And also no people of color either. It was all white men. The entire syllabus. Like that's actually crazy, you know? So,
yeah, so it's just like, it like blew my mind. It was like a completely new way of thinking about the world. Like, oh, women can be equal and it's not your fault. It's like systemic issues. Like women are more likely to be afraid of like applying to jobs. Because they have been conditioned since like they were little children to be like gentle, make sure they don't get hurt. Whereas boys like get taught to explore adventure. Don't worry if you get hurt, you know?
And it's crazy how we internalize these things, you know, like even me and you who are proud feminists, we read feminist philosophy, we're on top of these things. Even so, we can acknowledge when we internalize an issue and still feel that way, even with acknowledging it. Like I was just telling you the other day, which I think would be interesting for everyone to hear, is how when I'm like have sex with a woman, it's empowering and I feel like I'm sharing my body versus when I have sex with a man, I feel like I'm giving my body and it's more like vulnerable and it can be more shameful or just feels like I'm giving, you know, as opposed to sharing this experience. And that's because of the rhetoric that we've been taught that, you know, when a man woos you and you decide finally to give him sex, then it's like a treat for him, you know? And like that rhetoric, I've internalized it and I recognize it. And right now I still feel that way. And like, that's that, you know, like I'm just trying to get over it, but I still feel that way. And so what advice do you have for women who internalize these like ideas, but still feel the way that like the patriarchy, misogyny has pushed them to feel? What should they do?
I think what we were talking about, it's very interesting because like, especially in queer relationships, you get an opportunity to like not think in terms of gender. And so it's
which is quite challenging.
I think even in queer relationships, you end up thinking in terms of like one girl will be more masked and the other. So that's really interesting too. But like we're talking about heterosexual relationships right now. And I think it's hard. It's still something that it takes a lot of constant work to think about. And I think like the default if you're not thinking about it, is to just like be the girl and let the guy be the guy, because you've seen so many movies, you know how that works, you like know the script. But then when it's like, whoa, like I'm making more than him, or like, oh, like who pays the bill on dates? When you start thinking about those things, it's really important to make sure that your relationship, I think, stays a personal, like whatever makes the two of you feel the most comfortable, without letting any political factors get in the way. Like, am I not being feminist enough if I do this? Or am I being too feminist if I do that? But I do still think it's important, if you think you're not being true to yourself by not paying for dates, then that's like a conversation worth having. And like there have been studies done actually that there's a link between men who pay on dates and pay the entire bill, and those men are also more likely to subjugate women in the workplace and not give their work as much importance. Because, and I don't know how much of that is like caused. Like, I don't think there's
maybe it's like the idea of chivalry. You know, it comes with the good. Like, you don't have to pay for your meal. He opens up the door for you. He treats you like a queen. But also he expects you to fulfill the role of a woman, just like he's fulfilling the role of a man. You know, that means cleaning, making the bed, doing the dishes, making dinner, all of those things. You know, if it comes with the good and the bad. And so I guess it is more feminist to try to acknowledge. I think that's what it really is, what feminism really is about. It's not about like, you don't have to act and shave your head and stop wearing push-up bras and like, you know, all those things, even though I love your hair and I think it's super badass that you cut it recently. But I think it's about having these conversations, you know, like,
totally.
And it's about when you have a meal with a man, acknowledging why you would want him to pay the bill if you do, what that comes with, what that means, what does this really mean, and whether you're comfortable with it or not. And let's say you're not comfortable with it or it doesn't matter, to have that conversation and to say like, I want you to pay for the bill, but I don't want you to expect me to make your bed, you know? And I feel this way only because like, you know, it's just ingrained in me to want that. And it'll take me time to get over it, but I think eventually I will, you know, or just something like that. Like just having these conversations, I think is really important.
I think
to like being a true feminist. I think one thing about feminism too is, so like you're touching on this in the beginning, the idea of like hating on men, and in our society, like that is very normal, I would say. Like I don't like that. You know, like that at the acapella group, we were just at acapella and it's called Love Sucks. It was like a Stanford thing. And they pretty much like said, oh, one of the girls was bisexual. And she said that she likes a girl and a guy. And this guy's so perfect. He's amazing, blah, blah, blah. But the problem is, he's a man. That's what she said. And then everyone was laughing, ha ha ha, you know? But yeah, what are your thoughts on this men hating rhetoric? Because it is super prominent in our society, especially in the digital space. Hashtag men suck, I feel like is like, you know, like a thing. Or just like making fun of penises. Like, I don't know, just all of that. What are your thoughts on this? Is it okay? Or what are your thoughts?
I think just because the girls I know do it so much, I started doing it a little bit, even though I hated it initially, but it kind of just like
became a cultural norm.
Yeah. Like a natural response to like, oh, I was stood up on a date became this like generalized, don't worry about him, all men suck. Like that's just him being a man, sort of almost like shifting the blame onto the gender instead of the person.
Right.
And like recently I was having a conversation with my boyfriend where I said something about how, oh, like my friend, whatever, and all men suck because he was terrible to my friend. And then he was like, all men don't suck. Like, you're literally friends with like so many guys. Like, why are you saying that? Like, you would never say this in front of all your guy friends. And I would say like half of my friends are guys.
Yeah.
And I love them so much. But I was still saying that with my female friends.
Right.
And that was a moment where I felt like a bit of cognitive dissonance. And I was just like, oh, like I'm actually only saying this it's become like a catchphrase. Like it's become like just like a trendy word.
Right.
But
Totally.
I don't believe in it. And I do think like everyone is like their own individual person.
Totally.
And yes, some men suck, but I think like generally just like saying that is not a productive conversation to be having as a feminist.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like the back to that would be like, if to oppose that, the idea would be that it's a way to empower women because they've been in the past very oppressed. And like, this is kind of something that just makes them feel good in the moment.
Yeah.
You know, just like to like poke back a little bit.
That is true.
But is that okay? That's the reason. And I would say that that's why I've done it before.
Yeah.
Just because it makes me feel good, you know?
Yeah.
Like it genuinely just makes me feel good to be like, oh, men, you know, they're just, you know, they do this sometimes. It's just like, what do? There's nothing to do. And so like, I think that's why, like, at least I've done it before, and it is like that cultural norm that I've accepted. But I'm challenging myself more with that and trying not to do that as much, especially since my roommate is a guy.
Yeah.
And I've noticed, like you said, that when you do this around men, it doesn't hit the same, you know? Like Andrew looks at me and he's like, I call, you know, he's just like, bro, like, you're like, I'm not a bad guy, you know? And I'm like, you aren't a bad guy. You're a really good guy. And so yes, I'm trying not to do that because I think in general, just poking at somebody, even if you've been poked a lot in the past, it just isn't the right, an eye for an eye isn't, we don't live in an eye for an eye society anymore.
Yeah.
You know, in ISIS, they believe, you know, but we're not ISIS. And so, so I think like I would challenge everyone who's listening to this podcast to try other ways to get back at these guys, not by poking at them, but maybe by just realizing that them as individuals maybe aren't good, you know, and we don't have to generalize. And I think also this speaks to another idea that in general, when there's a societal norm about anything, it's very easy to fall in line with it. Why did anti-Semitism become so normal? You know, like why, and like making fun of gay people, even when people weren't comfortable with that, it just became normal to call somebody a fag, you know, even if they weren't like homophobic. And so I just think that it's so easy for us as people to fall into these social norms, whatever it's about, really, even if you don't mean to be anti-Semitic or you don't mean to be homophobic or you don't mean to be sexist. It's just so easy to fall into that, like using this like linguistics to make fun of people and feel good about yourself. And so it's just to be more mindful of that and try not to fall into that anymore because we're boss ass bitches. So, you know. Who's your favorite feminist?
My favorite feminist?
Last question.
I have a couple. So I like Gia Tolentino a lot. She's a writer for the New Yorker, and she also published a book of essays, and I talk about her all the time. So you know this person.
What's an essay that everyone should read?
She has an essay called Never Stop Optimizing.
Okay. Cool. Sounds like you.
And it talks about, it just talks about like this crazy world we've come to where like, she talked about the history of bar as a dance form, you know, B-A-R-R-E.
No. Oh,
as an exercise form. But it's like derived from ballet.
Yeah.
And its main selling point is that it's going to make you look like a ballerina. Like it's not just a regular workout that's going to like tone your muscles and stuff. It's going to make you dainty and gentle and like ballerina-esque.
Interesting.
And the crazy history of it was like the founder was this crazy like sex maniac. She made her daughter like give blowjobs to special clients just to stay in their favor, and it was just
that's terrible.
And like the entire like their merch store at the bar studio, like it became like a huge franchise all over the world, or all over America though. And the merch store just had stuff about like, oh, like come here today, get engaged tomorrow, stuff like that, like catering to the male gaze fully. And another thing about bars, it was marketed as a way you can exercise without being sweaty afterwards. So a lot of working women like bar for that because they can just like, you know, pop in right after work or right before work and get their workout in and then go home and do everything they have to do at home. Like working women today are so busy. And even stuff like Sweet Green exists because of a woman's like desire to optimize. Sweet Green is not that tasty, to be honest.
This is a hot take though. People will disagree with you vehemently.
But Gia, Yeah, I don't think sweet green is that tasty, but like Gia Tolentino's take on it was basically like sweet green is famous and so popular because they give you free, like really fast food, but it's not unhealthy. They give you a fast salad that can be a meal and that you can have in 15 minutes so that you don't waste time while you're at work.
Right.
And women love that because it keeps them in shape, it keeps them looking good, and it keeps them working hard. Like, and just like stuff like that we like, little things that the way we structure our lives to always be optimizing, we're like letting go of the actual like smelling the roses part of life.
I think that's so interesting too, just in the sense that in terms of beauty and preparation, women spend so much more time preparing themselves as opposed to a man, you know, with shaving your legs and shaving your armpits and makeup, and all this takes time. And so having to optimize does make sense to me. You know, we do have to optimize in order to get all of our shit done and get the workout class in and, you know, like get the makeup on and all of that. So that's like really interesting. That's really cool. Yeah, everyone should definitely check that out. I'll add it in the link below.
Another one that I think you'd really like is Bad Feminist by Roxane Gay.
Oh, is that a book?
It's a book and a TED Talk.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And the TED Talk is so funny. She basically, like, her whole argument is that I can be a feminist even though I listen to rap songs where...
Love that.
where rappers talk about, like, women's asses and stuff. Like, and, like, all the ways that you can be a feminist and you don't have to be a perfect feminist because the world is worse than you anyway.
Yeah. Loved it. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming onto the pod and for sharing your resources. And, yeah.